Welcome to FranCoach's Franchising 101 podcast series. Here we talk about all things franchising. What is it all about? Is it for you? How do you find the best one to own? And so much more. Now your host, Tim Parmeter.
Hello, everyone, and thanks for tuning in to the latest edition of FranCoach's Franchising 101 podcast. I am Tim Parmeter, founder and CEO of FranCoach, and your Franchising 101 host. Today, we have one of our franchise partners joining us today to talk about their brand. Well, and actually several of them, and more importantly, their unique approach to creating happy, successful franchisees with happy long-term customers. Sounds pretty good. Before we get to them, a quick reminder of who we are. And FranCoach is a national search firm dedicated to working with individuals who are interested in owning a franchise. We're partnered with well over 600 of the top franchisors in the country, spanning nearly 70 industries. Our goal is to help clients find the absolute best franchise to own. And the goal of the Franchising 101 podcast series is to help educate people on all aspects of franchise ownership. All right, that's us. Now, as always, let's get to the good stuff. And our guest, and joining us today, is the Senior Vice President of Franchise Development for Happinest Brands, Mr. Eric Martin. Eric, thanks for joining us today.
Tim, it is my pleasure to be here. Thank you so much for the opportunity.
Cool, man. We've got a bunch of things we want to learn about the overall Happinest brands, but the specific ones. But franchising, I think more than anything at its core is a people business. And I like to always kind of get to know people and hear their story of how did you, Mr. Eric Martin, get into this crazy world that is franchising?
I'm sure you've heard this before, but we don't find franchising. Franchising somehow has a way of finding us. I kind of fell into it. Honestly, I'm so glad I did many years ago. So my background really started off in athletics. I got done with college. I had played football in college and gotten into coaching, became a graduate assistant for my first real job. So I learned a lot from some pretty good mentors about how to handle my business and be accountable at a really young age. And I knew that wasn't my long-term path. It was a short-term experience, and I gained a lot from that and got my master's degree done. And I came back to where I'm from and where I live now and my family here in Omaha, Nebraska. And I wanted to get into corporate America. I felt like I was ready. I had some good skills, and I got involved. My very first real job was an enterprise rent-a-car. And I managed a branch for a period of time. I was promoted into the sales department, kind of the regional office, and overseeing the car sales division. And I knew that wasn't my career, but I learned an awful lot there. And I kind of worked myself into medical sales and recruitment and getting experience in a longer term process and working with higher level people. And that was a really cool experience. And someone I met in that line of work, they found franchising for a senior home care company and ended up getting into a kind of an international role. And this good friend of mine kind of opened my door to franchising and said, hey, this particular company based in Omaha in the senior care space is looking for somebody to help with franchise development. And I said, franchise development? What is it? Kind of like a McDonald's, Subway type of thing? I knew nothing about franchising, like many of our candidates and many of us when we kind of get into it initially. Everybody's got to start somewhere. So it kind of found me. I made some different steps along the way, got a break, got an opportunity to get in and learn from some really, really good people. That's part of life, right, Tim? You got to have mentors in life that see something in you, take you under their wing, and say, let me help you and see where this goes. And I never looked back. This was now going on 14 years ago. And, spent a lot of years with this particular company and through those journeys met someone named Scott Frith, who's the chairman of Happinest Brands. And we've known each other for years. And he presented this opportunity to me, like I said, about 6.5 years ago and said, I'm building a multi-brand company here, anchored by one of the top service franchise concepts in the country. Would you have some interest to help me take this to a new level? And I said, I would, but one caveat, I can't move to New Jersey, which is where Happinest is based. And I've got a wife and 4 daughters here, and they'd kill me if we left Omaha and all their grandparents and friends and family. He said, we can work on that and do this virtually. So that's kind of where that transition happened. And it's been an incredible journey so far. with Happinest, and we're just getting started. So that's kind of how I got into it. Led me here to today, and I'm blessed to be in it, like you.
That's awesome. No, and I there's literally every time I've asked that question, there's exactly one person that didn't have some version of dumb luck, like, right, as you said, it found you, not the other way around. And so, and we may have to have this conversation separately, as a former college basketball player and somebody who got into coaching for a while, like it's like there's a different weird mindset that we have, so which also kind of lends itself to franchising. I think it's why athletes make such great franchise owners. Follow the game plan, right? Follow the game plan, dummy. Don't mess it up, and good things are usually going to happen. So, super cool, man. So then, we have this thing called Happinest, and there are a handful of different franchises underneath. But for the brands, I think there's a little story and kind of method to the madness with Happinest. So kind of walk us, and I just said it wrong because you corrected me earlier, but walk us through a little bit of that, because I think it's really I think it's key to the success of the franchise owners and the different brands that are underneath the umbrella. So tell us a little bit about that.
Sure. Thank you. I think a good place to start, it's hard to talk about Happinest brands without talking about the anchor brand and the original Happinest brand, Lawn Doctor. Lawn Doctor started in the late 1960s in New Jersey and really took off in the 70s and has become, as you know, a powerhouse service concept around the country. There's about 650 locations, and we're adding several quality new franchise owners still every single year for that particular brand. It specializes in lawn treatment and conditioning. So not a mowing company, but fertilization, weed control, seeding, aeration. Really, we call it a lawn spa. Anything for the health and beauty of your property, whether you're a residential or commercial customer, we can provide. And that brand just recently was inducted into the Entrepreneur Media Hall of Fame. We're one of 3 brands, Lawn Doctor, to be ranked as a Franchise 500 for 44 straight years. The other 2 are Dunkin' Donuts and McDonald's. So we're in pretty elite company there. And why I start with that, Tim, is Lawn Doctor kind of built the path, created the path, if you will, or the map for what we wanted to create at Happinest, was leveraging experience, knowledge, over 200 collective years of franchising experience on the Happinest leadership team. But we learned a lot from Lawn Doctor, and Lawn Doctor has evolved and really changed in kind of how it looks compared to what it did even 10 years ago. This is very much an Amazon world. It's all about immediacy, speed to lead, user experience, quality. And then, of course, from there, that lends itself to retention. Well, a lot of this roadmap was created with Lawn Doctor by creating an in-house sales center, an in-house media team that centralizes all of the media and demand creation for franchise owners. And our staff size, since Happinest has been formed, has more than doubled. But even prior to that, I was like, we've got a lot of meat on the bone here. We've got a lot of resources. And Lawn Doctor is a wonderful company. It's expanded and continues to grow every single year. But what if we could use a lot of these learnings and these shared services that we have to accelerate the growth for other brands that are maybe emerging that fit into what we want to build, which is a home services focused franchisor, right? So what we love here is recurring revenue, mobility, no need for heavy bricks and mortar, not a need for a lot of employees, and really an opportunity for someone to scale thoughtfully. And there's a lot of synergy in our brands, right? We're a home services focused company. So to summarize, we acquired a brand called Mosquito Hunters in 2018. It's based in Chicago. At the time we acquired them, there were about 6 locations. We've grown that now to nearly 150. EcoMage was our next acquisition in 2019. At the time, 2 locations. We've now grown that to just shy of 100 locations. And we talked about this offline a bit earlier. We just recently announced our acquisition of Elite Window Cleaning, which is based in Canada. Does window cleaning, gutter cleaning, power washing, and house washing, to name a few of the services. But that brand is coming into the Happinest portfolio as well, and it's going to be focused in Canada. There will be a brand we're incubating here in the U.S. that will be announced officially toward the end of the year very similar to that of Elite in the United States. So we're going to continue adding brands thoughtfully that fit into our matrix. You're not going to see Happinest getting into food as an example, or retail. I never say never, but our focus is on service-related concepts that revolve around recurrence, repeat business, and having great retention opportunities for franchise owners. So home services, we'll talk more about that here in probably the next segment here, but it's just exploding. And we feel at Happinest that we're extremely well positioned to capture a lot of that market share, really based on kind of our culture here, in that we're nationally known, but we're locally owned, right? So when you start to think about business, you've got to have relevance. You've got to have a beautiful website. You've got to have conversion. You've got to have marketing happening. We can centralize a lot of those things across our companies for a franchise owner, but you can't duplicate great customer experience. And that's where that locally owned aspect comes in. You're plugging into a mothership at Happinest and a lot of resources that we can bring to a franchise owner, bring to a community. But our model doesn't work if we don't have a good local owner focusing on boots on the ground activities and customer relationships and management. So that's kind of what our focus is, finding the best of the best that want to be in home services, like our concept, whichever one that may be, and have an opportunity to perhaps maybe grow up with Happinest as they become more efficient as a franchise owner. There's an opportunity to go deeper in a territory, perhaps add another Happinest brand as it makes sense. We don't do this right away, believe me, but as someone evolves, it's a lot easier to grow up in service than it is to expand out. It can become much more complex the wider you get in a recurring model like we have here. So hopefully that gives you a good sense of kind of where we got started with Lawn Doctor, brands that we've added, brands that we are adding, and really utilizing the shared services approach to make a franchise owner more relevant and give them, as we call it, an unfair advantage. We can have you focus on the day-to-day, on your customers, and allow Happinest and our brands to focus on really generating that activity for you, that media, that presence, that validation. That's so hard to get as a local independent business owner.
Awesome. No, I love it. And I think as you talk about just the name and Happinest, and how you said it to me earlier was the nest. It's making us happy in our nest where we live. These are things, right? If we go outside, and as now we're into April, and I'm spoiled living in the South, so I can go outside most of the time, right? But I don't know how long ago it's been since there was some of that white stuff on the ground there in Omaha. But as you get outside, we want to be like, you go outside, and if I could pull the camera and show you my backyard, you'd be trying to get a lawn doctor dude over here in like 2 seconds to help make the grass grow. I don't have to worry about mosquitoes really here, but I grew up in the Midwest where that's not fun, right? And to, or just constantly having a clean house. I don't have to worry about it with those things. It really is like, it kind of actually makes a little sense in that recurring model. If you do a good job, like I have no reason to go as a customer, I have no reason to go shop for somebody else to come in there. You've done a good job. You're reliable. You show up. It's quality. It's a quality service. I'm going to be a customer like until I move, basically, right? So you've got that. You mentioned the home service. I want to talk about that just in general as an industry. 2 of your brands are outside, right? And so we just literally last week, we did a podcast, kind of, I call it the seasonality myth, right? Like, oh, I live in the North. I can't possibly run a seasonal business. We're not outside as much. Not doing the service 12 months a year. Those owners in the South are so much luckier than me. You've got 600 some owners with Lawn Doctor in particular. It's pretty evenly dispersed. Talk about that seasonality, a Lawn Doctor in Omaha versus a Lawn Doctor in Phoenix or Tampa or wherever. Are they suffering because of the seasonality? Are they able to build the same businesses? What's that look like for your owners?
Yeah, and you alluded to this. 2 of our brands are perimeter based, and there are definitely a lot of outside of the home, i.e. not crossing the threshold. And there are a lot of positives to that. Certainly flexibility, not having to reschedule people because they're not home. not typically nights and weekends because you're doing things during the day. So a lot of people are drawn to outdoor businesses because of that. But when you start thinking about some of our lawn doctor owners and mosquito hunters owners, some of our higher performers are in northern markets. And it's all about capturing business at the right time and fulfilling that demand as much as you can. We don't look at a customer like a customer. We look at them like they're 10 or 12 or 14 customers because you're seeing them scheduled all throughout the year, right? So there are some different services we offer in the north as we don't in the south. There's different programs because it's a different agronomy or a different climate. So we see a lot of very successful franchise owners in the northern markets, but generally that's what they want is seasonality. They want to have a business that has a defined start of servicing and a defined end, because a lot of our owners, they have off-season interests, or they might have other things that they want to do. Every business really, Tim, when you think about it, is seasonal. Even bricks and mortar and retail, right? There's going to be highs, there's going to be lows. The difference in a service model is it's very predictable. Because hey, my season's going to, for example, in Nebraska, end probably late October to early November is when my fall servicing season is done. And I know that's going to stop. And guess what else does? A lot of my expenses to run my day-to-day. There's no product, there's no employee costs, things like that. You got your website live and your vehicles and equipment, things like that into your off season, but you can manage your cash flow. We train our owners on that in our seasonal models where you're generating a lot of revenue in these power windows. You got to manage that into the off season. So when the servicing stops, so do a lot of the expenses compared to that of maybe a retail play where whether you have one customer in your store that day or you have 101 coming into your store that day, your expenses are the same 12 months out of the year. And that can be a little overwhelming. So it's very predictable. But I think it's almost one of the more attractive points to say, look, and this is being very real and candid, you can generate annual income and more so than a lot of bricks and mortar year-round businesses in these seasonal windows if you do it the right way. And that's very attractive to our type of investor.
Yeah. And it's not like you're not doing anything, right? You're still, a savvy owner is still building relationships in the community, referral sources. You might still even be doing sales consultations, things like that. From that standpoint, but I think it tends to blow people's mind that they think just because you're in the north that you're not going to make as much money because there's a smaller window. But there's such a premium on being outdoors in the northern states. You can charge more. They have, I think, a better appreciation of I need everything great because I can only be out there for 6-8 months out of the year versus me in waffling back and forth between Florida and Arizona. I'm freaking spoiled. I can go outside almost all year long and not have to worry about it, right? And then you mentioned with mosquito hunters. Well, and again, I know the answer to this, but where was Mosquito Hunters founded? Which I think is a really good example of how seasonality is really not that big of a deal for things like this. Where were they founded?
Chicago, Illinois.
Last I checked,
and
right.
Pretty seasonal. And without getting into all the details, like when you look up and down the board at Happinest and our concepts in different markets, you'll see a lot of northern markets just performing at extremely high levels. And you make a really good point. You've got a limited window to enjoy that experience in certain markets. So you want it taken care of, right? And spend time outdoors and enjoy your property. And Mosquito Hunters in Chicago has done incredibly well. But we've seen several other northern market owners just scaling at incredible rates. So you made a good point. You're always working on your business. There's an off season in just about anything. It's more of an off season you can prepare for and know what am I going to get done to set myself up for that next what we call power window in the spring. Whether it's upsells, it's bundles, it's marketing going out, it's Christmas cards. We're always thinking of ways to stay top of mind and in front of our customers. So it's not like the engine turns off and it's just you shut her up and you come back and open up again in April. No, you're always working on, you're always strategizing. But it's nice to take a little break and a breath and say, okay, let's look at last year. How did I do? Where can I make improvements? And how do I grow into my next season and be prepared for that? But you run hard in those earlier stages, right? When you're building the business. Yeah. And it's nice to have that moment to take a breath and reflect.
Yeah. Kind of like our days, decades ago of being a college athlete or a college coach. You're like, the season's over and people will go, well, what are you doing now? I'm like, we just don't have games, right? We're still doing all this stuff. It might be slightly less, but you're still working year round, right? Whether you're the athlete and you're still doing you're lifting, you're playing, you're doing whatever your stuff, or you're the coach, you're constantly recruiting, looking for new players. Same thing with your owners, still constantly out there looking to try to find who can I get more referral sources from? How can I get out and market and network to get more customers on the docket for next year? Hey everyone, I wanted to take a quick break from our podcast to tell you about our amazing friends at Entrepreneur. If you're looking to become a franchisee or simply learn more about business ownership, and guys, let's be honest, you're listening to the Franchising 101 podcast, so we know you have some interest in it. Really encourage you to go to entrepreneur.com to check out all of their great content and resources. Seriously, Entrepreneur has everything, all the way from a bookstore to the best podcasts, webinars, and videos, plus information on upcoming events and the latest articles that seriously, they cover all aspects of franchising and business ownership. If you're having trouble deciding which franchise is right for you, start with Entrepreneur's renowned Franchise 500 ranking, which highlights the best franchises of 2022. For 45 years and counting now, Entrepreneur has been and can be the most widely recognized and respected authority in the franchise market. Digital and print subscriptions are available, so you never miss out on anything. So seriously, what are you waiting for? Go to entrepreneur.com right now and learn more. Talk a little bit about your owner, right? So and I know it's probably a little bit different for each, but is there any kind of common thread across the Happinest brands that you're looking for in an owner?
It's a great question. When you think about home services in general, it's kind of a blue collar industry. There's a lot of fragmentation. There are several independent moms and pops, some that are hobbies or side hustles, and you get a lot of that kind of fragmentation, I'll put it, in the service space. What we attract, or what we aim to attract, are people that embrace that, hey, I'm looking at a fragmented space. It is a blue collar space, but we run it in a very experiential, white glove, white collar way. So when you start to think about blue collar space, white glove, white collar approach, customers don't necessarily expect real professionalism, thorough follow-up, communication. That's what we pride ourselves in here at Happinest. And we start to look at owners, we tell them very early, we're not asking you to go out and knock on doors. We don't like that. That's not our style here at Happinest. We want to create demand, create a presence through several different tactics. Some of those you'll implement, what we call ground game, local development, lawn signs and door hangers, and getting involved in your chamber or BNI, social events, sponsorships, home and garden shows, farmers markets. I mean, the list goes on. We even use our vehicles. We call them mobile billboards. We move them around the community, do parketing and park and wave. So there's a lot of things that owners are involved in, but they know demand creation, whether it's digital ads, display, Facebook and Instagram, direct mail. We're doing the creative and we're pushing that into their zip codes. They're focused on that ground game activity. But beyond that community presence, that community builder, you want someone who's communicative, good with people, can develop rapport, have some, not so much salesmanship, but more consultative sales confidence, being able to communicate with people and know their brand inside and out and be that community ambassador. We look for folks that are positive, Tim. We talk about this on our Meet the Team days and what we look for. We talk about the 4 Ps a lot, which is positivity, patience, proactiveness, and perseverance. We want to see candidates that display those 4 Ps consistently because there's going to be challenges. You and I both know that nothing's perfect, but being able to push through those things and keep a positive demeanor, and that's really important for us. So those are some of the attributes we look for. But the last thing is, do you have a turf management background or a degree in horticulture, or are you a licensed applicator, or have you cleaned homes before? Those aren't things we're looking for. Those are very trainable skill sets. The arrow and the quiver that needs to come along with a candidate are the things that I kind of listed there.
Yeah. And I think, and I'm glad you kind of pointed out that last piece, because I think there's a common misconception, right? Well, like either I don't know, and the joke I always tell people, like you could typically be the biggest slob on the planet and own a cleaning franchise, right? You don't need to. You guys looking at an EcoMates candidate, you're not coming into their house to see how clean it is to see if you want them to be an owner. They're like that's not their job. Though weirdly, I think it's a good advantage if you were if I owned EcoMates, every person I was interviewing, they'd be cleaning my house, right, to see how they did. I'd have the cleanest house in the world, and I'd know if people were good. But that you don't need that experience because your owners, I mean, they might hop in there once in a while to kind of help out, but they're not the doer all day long, right? They're, like you said, they're out connecting in the community. They're building their staff. Maybe doing consultations when somebody, inquires about, hey, I'm interested in your service. Can you sit down and talk to them? But you guys aren't looking for that day in, day out. Like they're doing the service all day, every day. Correct?
That's correct. Yeah. And you'll hear that term in service concepts. They call the man in the van or the bucket Bob or the chuck in the truck. We talk very early with candidates about the role of an owner and the expectation, and we want owners that want to work on it and not in it. Yeah. Not to be too cliche, but that's how you start, is with that mentality. And individuals you're talking to, I'm talking to, it's changing. Home services is becoming more and more sophisticated now that franchising is getting more involved in it. And why is that? It's really, when you look at kind of both ends of the spectrum, the baby boomers, 78 million strong. Okay? Millennials, over 90 million. Those two generations are defining how business operates in our country. And when you think about the opportunities behind home services with the boomers, we lovingly refer to that as kind of the can't do it society in many cases, living at home, aging in place, living much longer lives, which is great, but need more hands around to help around that home. Then you got the millennial, we call that the don't want to do it. I've got one of them, okay? I know how that is, right? They don't want to pick up a paintbrush. They don't want to clean the home. They don't want to treat for pests, for God's sakes, or take care of their lawn or their siding or their window. They value their time, their experience, and they're willing to spend money disproportionately in many cases to their income level to have it done for them. That generation is the reason why home formation in this country is expected to more than double over the next 10 to 15 years. Right. So we see this convergence happening where home services, it's a $600 billion space. And to date, it's been really dominated by moms and pops. And we see a share shift happening. We see consolidation over the years to come where the bigger players, the multi-brand platform companies that have gotten really good at marketing and being able to drive revenue and shared services. And when you start thinking about the long-term vision of a Happinest brands, we want to drive down the acquisition costs. Because Tim, if I've got, 3 or 4 of my brands in your area, and I've got 3 or 4 ad funds going into that area and 3 or 4 owners in that area doing a great job, sharing referrals and creating systems where, hey, you've used Lawn Doctor for years. Let me introduce you to our sister brand, EcoMates. It's a Happinest brand, great review scores. You can trust us. Let's go ahead and knock off 20% off of your service and let's give us a shot. That strategy is going to continue to evolve for companies like Happinest once we have dispersion and several brands in a market. And that's really where this gets interesting for a franchise owner, whether they own several brands themselves or they're one of several owners in a marketplace that's benefiting from those resources.
Yeah, and again, just some of the things like buying power, right? Your owners are gonna get things for significantly less than if just me or you walked in off the street to buy, any of the equipment, any of the product. I think that's a huge thing that gets lost on people as well, right? So there's probably a million things you could talk about, but if there is a certain aspect of the support internally that you're going to provide franchisees, is there anything that really in particular that you would want to highlight that you guys, man, we kill it with this. We're awesome at this area of support.
I think where I would start is with Happinest. Nothing in life is easy. Nothing is. It takes effort. It takes boots on the ground. There's always a lift. And I think early on when we're talking to potential franchise owners, it's interesting to me. I think about this a lot, as I know you do, Tim. Like, people are wanting control. They're wanting predictability. They're wanting flexibility. But in the short term, they're embracing some chaos. They're embracing some uncertainty, some unpredictability. I'm starting a new business. Having a franchisor behind you mitigates a lot of that risk. There is a proven system, as we know. There is a roadmap that has to be executed on, and it's a two-way street. So I'm very upfront. Anybody we work with, most people don't start businesses because it's hard. Those that do, that 1% that take that leap and have success, people see that owner 5, 10, 15 years down the road so successful. If I want to be like that, I could have done that. Well, you didn't take the initiative. You didn't start at ground zero. Smart people start at ground zero, but they do it with a good franchisor that can provide them that roadmap. You and I both were in athletics, right? So we can kind of appreciate this. I look at a franchisor puts you on the 50-yard line going in. You're not backed up on your own 5 trying to figure out how to get that first down. That's really hard to do. You've got an advantage. Now, where we shine as a franchisor is centralization. We're taking off of the plate from an owner things that can be centralized, whether it's financials, it's IT, it's marketing, it's sales with our sales center. These are duplicative actions that happen every day and have to. But as a local business owner, where your focus should be is on your customer base. Taking care of people that paid you yesterday, right? That's where you get retention. We're helping you find people looking to pay tomorrow, taking that off of their plate so they can focus on those boots on the ground. And we could talk for an hour about all the services and the support that a Happinest brand provides a franchise owner. But beyond the centralization, I think growing thoughtfully, we've gotten really, really good at marketing surgically, helping owners know how to improve that with their ground game. We've created micro territories. And the last thing we want to do is have someone get too wide too quick, as I said earlier. Go deep in your area. Let's build some density and efficiency. And then from there, talk about strategizing on growing, whether it's another brand or another territory. So providing data, analytics, systems to our franchise owners so they know where they stand at any point in comparison to the entire system or in their region, as an example. What gets measured gets improved in business. And having good data and history to kind of look at and say, where am I at in comparison to my peers? That's how we coach franchise owners. Not to be punitive or big brother. You don't sign up to be a business owner to have a boss, but you do become a franchise owner because you want guidance and you want that path, if you will. And I feel that's what we provide a lot of value to our franchise owners with them.
Awesome. No, I love it. And I think just in general, most people, when they start looking at franchises, end up being very overwhelmed by the level of support, and sometimes in areas that they didn't even realize they were going to need support, right? But and I totally wrote this down. I'm going to steal it like I came up with it. But what gets measured? How do you say that? Well, like what gets measured gets
measured gets improved,
right?
Yeah.
And again, like my brain still, even after all these years, kind of works like an athlete, right? It's the stats, right? Well, I took 20 shots. I'm sure I made over half of them, right? Like if we actually counted, no, it was like 2, dude. You suck. Let's get out there and let's work on this. Let's work on that, right? And get better. And really, and I know you guys have a great reputation for this of like helping, and again, not being punitive, not being the micromanager, not being a boss. It's like, as a franchisee, what are your goals, right? Are you happy, at this level with one territory? If you're happy, like happy franchisee, happy franchisor. But if you want more, you want to reach higher levels of goals, you guys have all those things in place to be able to kind of coach and guide somebody to how do we get to this level? How do we expand? And again, the multi-brand thing to me is it's killer, especially for what you guys are doing, because again, it's recurring revenue. You've built the trust of being a quality provider. If you're doing it for Lawn Doctor, they're gonna trust you for mosquito hunters. They're gonna trust you for EcoMaids. They're gonna trust you for whatever that next one is coming down the road. So again, people would want that empire builder mentality. You guys are helping them do it, but in a smart, sensible way, not just throwing a bunch of what against the wall to see what sticks. So I just and you and I know there's some players out there in this world that don't do it the right way. And so kudos to you guys for building that. So, and thank you so much, Eric, really for coming on to kind of share all this with us.
Tim, it's been my pleasure. And, with you and I having a background in athletics and in coaching, I think the last thing I'll leave our guests with here is good franchise owners. I've done this a long time, and as you have, and kind of looked at attributes of what makes somebody successful as a franchisee. And to me, one of the biggest attributes is they're coachable. Really and truly. I think when people start a business, they're entrepreneurial. They want to go out on their own. They want to be successful and build wealth and an asset that can be monetized and get family maybe involved. And who knows, maybe someday sell that business for a nice return or keep it in the family. But it starts in the beginning, checking the ego at the door. Everybody who starts a business, if you're qualified to start a franchise and you're a part of a good franchisor, you're vetted as much as you're vetting that franchise system. Right. And you're not going to be in this situation if we don't feel like you can be successful, if you're not well capitalized. So inherently, most people coming into it have been successful, but it's kind of checking that ego at the door and saying, teach me. I want to follow your system. And there's a time and a place, Tim, for an owner to branch out a little bit, try some new things, experiment. But in those first 2 to 3 years, it's the most important time to execute, to follow those systems, to learn from the best, to be involved in those peer group meetings and learn from coaches and be at the conferences. Gobble it up as much as you can because it's going to set you up for long-term success. Forget about what you knew or what you thought you knew. Come into it with a clean slate, be coachable, embrace that, and it will set you up for success long-term.
Follow the dang plan. It's really that simple, but sometimes that's like people can't do it. So, no, I love it, man. Eric, really, thank you so much for coming on today to talk to us about Happinest and their different brands. So thank you so much.
Thanks, Tim. Hope to do it again sometime soon.
Absolutely. And lastly, for all of our wonderful loyal podcast listeners, thanks again for tuning in. Reach out to us. You're listening to the Franchising 101 podcast. Of course, you're interested in becoming a franchise owner. Let's chat. FranCoach.net, Franchising101podcast.net. There's never, ever any fee for our service. So reach out, set up that first call, and let us help you find your better tomorrow. Thanks, everybody. Have a great day.
Thanks for listening to FranCoach's Franchising 101 podcast, where our ultimate goal is to help educate you on all things franchising so you can create your better tomorrow.